And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. It's good to be here with you on a Wednesday morning. Today's session is an Ask Me Anything session. And as usual, you did not disappoint. I've received a number of great questions. We're going to jump right into them. And I want to try and get to as many of your questions. Oops. Hold on, I stopped my video there. There we go. As many of those questions as I can. And our first question this morning comes from Dan Simino in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I've known Dan for many years, and it's a great question. And Dan asks, what is your take on posting works in progress or progression slideshows of artwork on an artist's website? Could the works in progress gallery motivate potential collectors? So I have seen quite a number of artists who are doing this, sharing works in progress on their website, on social media, just a variety of different ways to share them. Dan, as you mentioned, photos of the work in progress, a slideshow. I've seen time-lapse videos of artwork being shared. And generally speaking, I like the idea of doing this. We are always looking for content to share with our collectors, something that's interesting and engaging, and maybe something that goes beyond simply posting a photograph of the work, sharing the title and size and price, and saying, "Here's a piece of artwork for sale. Please buy it." In essence, that's what you're saying, right? When you're sharing an image of your artwork. And so, we'll share bits of artists' biographies. We'll share images of the gallery. We'll talk about events that are coming up. We don't want to be hammering our collectors week after week with, just blatant sales attempts. Not to say that we don't do that. I mean, certainly we do keep our clients apprised of new work that's come in, and we are encouraging them to visit the gallery and the website. But if we can have something else in the mix, it is a bit of a palate cleanser, if you will, for the weekly email, and can help encourage the client to be more interested in opening and reading. And so similarly, you as an artist can accomplish the same thing by thinking about different ways that you can engage with your followers through email or social media or on your website. And so that could include certainly works in progress. It could include if you're out on location or doing a photo shoot, getting some images of that, sharing it, telling the story, talking about shows and sharing images of your work in a gallery. Anything that you can do to mix it up is definitely potentially a positive way to engage. Now, there is, and I have heard some artists make a counter argument to this, and that is that when it comes to sharing your artwork, you don't want people to know how the sausage is made. You want to keep it somewhat magical and mysterious. And I do hear some of that. And I have seen there was an interesting reaction. One of the artists that we show in our Pine Top Gallery had posted a time lapse. There was a time lapse and there were some progress photos, so she was sharing it on social media, the progress of this piece. And a client of ours was following her social media account and came into the gallery a few days later and said, "Oh, it was so cool to watch her make this piece." I couldn't believe that she started and finished that painting in about 28 hours. And obviously there was some sleep in there. It went so quickly. And so, you could almost say, well, oh, is that a little bit of a negative thing? Or are we showing people that this is easier than it seems, and that we're fleecing them for their hard-earned dollars to sell them artwork that's being quickly produced in the studio? But that was actually not the reaction that the client had. The client had watched with rapt attention, was kind of amazed at how the piece came together, and I think potentially could have bought the piece had it not sold prior to her having the chance to another client of ours. And so I, you know, I guess that I can see that maybe you do want to keep some mystery. You're not sharing every bit of what you're doing. But you know, even if that's the case, you could judiciously take and share some imagery. Maybe if you're worried about it seeming like it's coming together more quickly, then you spread things out a little bit and make it seem like it takes a little longer. You know, you can edit, you can kind of control the experience. But again, I come back around and say, I just think that this is something that collectors are very interested in. Whenever we have artists in the gallery doing demonstrations, people will stand around and ooh and ah and watch, and you know, they're fascinated by the process. And a lot of non-artists, you know, it's not that they're aspiring to become artists, but they're just very interested in understanding those processes. So I would encourage you to give it a shot. I would suspect that if you share it on social media, you will see a high level of engagement on those kinds of posts. And that you'll get maybe even more reaction than you do in a typical post on social media. And you know, if you do that, be sure and link to your website and encourage people to see the finished piece. And even though we're giving them something different than a "here's my artwork, buy it" kind of post, sure, don't forget to give them the opportunity to buy it as you're sharing that. And I would suspect that if you kind of get in the habit of doing these on occasion, that it can be a great way to drive engagement and some additional sales. But great question, Dan. Thank you. And I've got a question from Alyssa. This is a gallery approaching gallery engagement question. As a photographer, would you suggest that I concentrate on galleries that specialize in photography or galleries that specialize in my subject matter? And Alyssa, those who've been here for a while will not be surprised to hear me say the answer is yes. Yes to both of those things. I've beat on the drum frequently here that as you're approaching galleries, the goal should be to go broad, to approach as many galleries as you can to get your portfolio out in front of a good number of gallery owners. And so in an effort to do that, I would encourage you not to put too much thought or discrimination into who you are or aren't including in sending out your portfolio. You're going to benefit from sending it out to as many gallery owners as you can. And I would also argue to do it on a repeated basis if you're not getting responses right away, to follow up with those galleries. But in this particular instance, and you know, this wouldn't just apply to photographers, but anyone who's doing a somewhat specialized medium or style or subject matter that feels a little more of a niche, you especially are going to benefit from having your artwork out broadly. And so yes, it makes sense if there's a gallery on your list that's focusing on photography. Why wouldn't you approach them? And even if they don't have, and in fact, especially if they don't have photography in your style or of your subject matter, you may be opening a new avenue for them to reach a new potential collector base. So why wouldn't we go ahead and give them that opportunity? But at the same time, you know, there are many galleries who are not photography galleries, and I would include myself among these, who can find a place for photography and mixed media and digital art in the mix of other artists that they're showing. And if your subject matter is, it doesn't have to be a perfect match, but if it's harmonious with what they are showing in their gallery, it could be a great opportunity for that gallery to say, here's something new, here's something interesting, I'm going to give this a shot. So why not give them that opportunity? And so Alyssa, if you haven't been here long, you'll often hear me say that my suggestion is that you build a list of 100 galleries that you're going to put your portfolio out to. And you'll very quickly see that if you start to get too picky about which galleries you're going to submit to, that it becomes a challenge to build that list. And so I would just add galleries to the list, get the portfolio in front of them, and then let them decide. They'll let you know if they feel like it is a potential fit or not. Carol from Ontario asks, this is a pretty straightforward, brief question. Is it common for commercial galleries not to sign contracts with their artists? That's an interesting question. I suspect that question might be coming from some recent experience maybe that you've had where you presented your work to a gallery, they're interested in showing you, and no paperwork is presented. Common, it's not as common or not very common from my experience interacting with artists and talking to them about getting into galleries. At least in the circles I run in, it would be fairly common for you to be presented with at least some kind of paperwork laying out the terms of the relationship. Now, it may be, and there are quite a few galleries out there who may not have much of a formal agreement or a written agreement, and in that case, in essence, the deal might be made on a handshake and a verbal agreement. You're still going to want to know all the same things. What is the commission percentage that the gallery is asking? What's their view on exclusivity? How much inventory do they want? What's their process for remitting payment when pieces are sold? What are their shipping policies? What's their insurance like? It's a lot of questions to ask. And so as a gallery owner, in my opinion, you as a gallery you're going to save yourself some time and potential confusion if you write this all up and put it into an agreement. You just want to move to have as much transparency and understandability in your relationship with your artists as possible. And again, in my experience, it's going to save you grief down the road and potential conflict if you've got a written agreement in place. Now there are fewer questions that are going to come your way down the road. So if you're interacting with galleries and presenting a portfolio to them and they're asking you if you'd be interested in working with them, you have a potential for a relationship with that gallery, and they don't offer a consignment agreement, I would suggest that it might make sense for you to offer your own. And you would want to do it in a little bit of a diplomatic and friendly way. You could ask, oh, do you have a written agreement? And if they say no, you say, oh, well, for instances like this, I've come up with a simple agreement, that kind of lays out the terms of how I typically work with galleries. Here it is. Could you take a look at it? And could we use this as the basis for our consignment agreement? Again, I work with a lot of artists in the Art Business Academy, and in the Academy, I offer a copy of our consignment agreement that an artist could take and adapt and use and present to galleries. But as I've worked with a good number of artists in the Academy, I've had a number of them who have done this, and in the vast majority of cases, the gallery owner has been very willing to review the article, and maybe some adjustments needed to be made, but then was willing to sign it. And in a number of cases, the galleries have said, hey, would you mind if we used this agreement that you created to share with our other artists? Maybe they just hadn't ever created one because it seemed too daunting. And sometimes there's a little bit of a sense that maybe you need to get a lawyer involved, which we did. And it's not a bad idea to make sure you're not getting yourself into any trouble. But at the end of the day, my hope is, and my experience is, that you're not going to see a lot of, hopefully, litigation around these agreements. It's not that you're trying to brace yourself for future legal engagement with your galleries. Rather, it's that you're trying to set a framework and build an understanding of what you can expect from the gallery and what they can expect from you. And I find that having that written agreement, like I say, just smooths over and hopefully eliminates a lot of future potential confusion. Now, of course, we could go in and spend a whole day talking about the various potential clauses that I already mentioned, shipping and who's responsible for costs and promotional, all that. I don't want to do that here today, but it's just a good idea to get as clear a picture ahead of time as you can when it comes to a new relationship. Let me go to a question from Gina in Anchorage, Alaska. And Gina asks, if an artist finds themselves at the stage of their career where their style and ability is changing rapidly, what's the best way to handle older art that no longer reflects the style direction that they're now going in? If they had some success selling in the past, but think the new direction will improve sales, do they make the older stuff disappear? Okay, this, and we're actually going to get another question kind of in this same vein. But it's a good question. You know, what do I do if there is a major evolution or shift in my style? Maybe it's not only style, but maybe it's subject matter, or maybe it's even I'm moving to a new medium. What do I do with old artwork that's in inventory and is still available, and in a lot of cases is still good, strong work, but simply is not consistent with my current body of work? And there is some wisdom in being analytical about this, and you know, really trying to decide how the work fits or doesn't fit with your current body of work. You know, again, I often beat the drum here that as we're putting together a portfolio and showing our work to galleries, and then having them potentially visit our website or even our studio, that we want to be a little bit careful not to send the message that we don't know what we're doing. You know, that we're scattered, that we feel pulled in different directions, because that kind of messaging makes gallery owners like myself nervous. You know, the challenge is that I'm going to start selling your work, and if you're going to change directions dramatically, it could put me in a little bit of a rough spot. Maybe I don't like the new work that you're doing, or maybe my collectors don't. And so we just want to be careful to send that message that this new direction that I'm working in, my focus is on this. I'm passionate about it. I'm excited about it. I'm going to create a body of work around this style and subject matter. And you can count on getting inventory in the future as this work starts to sell. And so any older work that would show up on a website or in your portfolio has the potential to sabotage that message. And so we just want to be conscious of that. And so then the question does arise, well, I may have dozens of, or even hundreds of works in that older style. What do? I don't want to abandon them. I don't want to have to hold a bonfire and you know, dedicate them to the gods or that kind of thing. What do I do here with that older work? And I understand that it can be a real challenge, and you know, I don't have a perfect answer to that. I've written about it on the blog and asked for suggestions. If you do a search on red.blog, what to do with older works, older unsold works, you'll see several posts about it and some good suggestions. Donations, you know, giving it away to family and friends are some options. Creating a second separate portfolio and directing that work to other galleries could potentially be an option. Of course, the challenge there is if those other galleries start selling that work well, now you've got a little bit of a problem in that there is a finite supply of that artwork available, and you know, you're going to run into some potential demand that you might not be able to meet for that artwork. So it's a challenge. It's a bit of a conundrum for an artist who's making a major shift. What I wouldn't do, though, is let that stop you. If you're feeling enthusiastic and engaged and energized by this new body of work that you're creating, you don't want to feel like that old work is an anchor that's preventing you from moving forward with this new work. And so my suggestion would be, this is one case where procrastination might be the right answer. And in that, maybe we take that older body of work and we do pull it back from the website and keep it out of the portfolio and hold it on the sidelines and say, I am not going to worry about the disposition of that artwork right now. I'm going to keep my focus on this new body of work. I'm going to build up a large enough body of work that I can get it out there and get it into galleries and start building a business around it. And that is going to be a full-time job, for the foreseeable future. And so I just can't let my mental energy or my efforts get pulled into worrying about what I'm going to do with this older work. I'll come back to that later on and figure out what to do with it at a future point. Maybe I've seen a couple comments. Maybe there is an opportunity to repurpose some of the materials and move them into the newer style, although that can sometimes be a challenge too. It can, if you're completely reusing them, and you just, eventually hope that you'll be able to find a solution. And if not, you leave that challenge to your heirs and let them figure out what the solution is in the future. But like I say, we just don't want to get stuck in it and let it keep us from moving forward. Jeff from New York asks 2 questions. Number 1, what are your thoughts about framed matted photos with glazing versus metal prints that also might be framed? And also, how about framed photos with no glazing, but protective spray? So questions like this that get a little bit more into the technical aspects. Am I varnishing or not varnishing? Is my photo framed or on metal? I don't necessarily and in fact, I'm not just saying this to you, Jeff, but really to artists who I'm working with in the gallery, I try not to get too involved in the nitty-gritty details of what you are creating or producing and how you're doing it. Partly because I'm not an artist myself, and so I don't necessarily have a lot to say there. But even more than that, there can just be several different variables that are going to come into play that really ultimately only you as the creator can decide how you want to work through them. I will say that not only have I seen the different presentations that you're talking about, but I have in my gallery shown works in all of those formats, traditionally printed, glazed, framed, and then works printed on metals. I have worked with some artists who have mixed and matched the two. I'd be careful about that. We're going to talk again in a minute about consistency of presentation, and you want to be careful not to introduce too much variety into the body of work that you're putting out there. But if your subject matter and style and approach to creating the work is very cohesive and strong, it can permit you to have some latitude to experiment with different substrates and presentations of your work. And perhaps some of your work lends itself more to a printing on metal. And certainly I am seeing that a lot of clients, especially with a more contemporary aesthetic, more contemporary home, are interested in some of these new or newer approaches to printing photos or other reproductions of artwork. And so, it could be worth experimenting and seeing what gets the strongest response with your work. I find, I spend a good amount of time, not quite as much time over the last 18 months, but normally I'm doing a lot of traveling and visiting galleries and spending time looking at artwork. And I'm just seeing a wide variety of different approaches to the presentation, especially when it comes to straight photography, but also digital and digitally created artwork. And I think that there are some great opportunities there. And if you feel like one or the other of those approaches is going to lend itself more to your artistic vision, give it a shot. See what the results are, and you'll find that there are audiences that are willing to accept your presentation no matter what it is. Now, the second question is, do you agree with the common wisdom that an artist has to participate in a show 2 to 3 times at least before they could expect decent sales beyond or behind their costs for booth, hotel, food, prep, etc.? I am always a little bit leery of common wisdom. And I certainly don't make a lot of decisions based on common wisdom, because my concern is that this kind of quote unquote common wisdom might be used to excuse my lack of efforts in some way. And so with this example, if I'm telling myself, well, this is my first time at a show, and it's probably going to take several times for me to ramp up sales, am I not kind of giving myself a little bit of an out, maybe when it comes to my sales efforts? And I just don't want to do that. I guess what I would say is that if I think about the core of this kind of comment, it takes some time. I could see a kernel of truth there. We find in the gallery that it can often take some time and repeated exposure when we bring a new artist on for them to start to see a reaction to the work, for our clientele to become familiar with them and get to a point where they're comfortable making a purchase. And so I suppose we could transpose that onto a show or an art festival and say, well, maybe it's going to take some time for it to occur there too. But my hesitation with that is that I believe the dynamic of a weekend art show or festival or a longer event is going to be a little bit different than a gallery. An event like that is going to, by necessity, is going to encourage visitors to visit during that very closed specific amount of time. And they know that, if they see something that they like, they better make a purchase, because after the weekend, that purchase is, that opportunity is not going to be there anymore. And so they have an incentive to act more quickly than they might in a gallery, where they could say, well, we'll just come back next week or next month and take another look at this artist's work and see if it's still growing on us. And so that dynamic is a little bit different. I think the other dynamic that can be quite different is that you are going to have at shows repeat visitors, people in the area who return season after season to come to that show and see what's new, what's going on in terms of new artists. But you're also going to have a large contingent of folks who maybe don't return regularly. And I can't see anything, certainly for those folks, but also really for the return visitors. I can't see anything in that dynamic that is going to change their perception of your work on the second event or third event as opposed to the first event. I guess I'm taking a long way around of saying, just give every event that you participate in your all. Make your very best efforts, put your very best work forward, interact with your clients at a high level, and just give it a go. And why not try and turn that very first event into an extremely positive event? And so the last part of that question really would be to help you to determine, is this a show that I really want to participate in or participate in again? Right? Because if I participated in it first time and I didn't get a great reaction, then I'm taking this conventional wisdom and saying, well, maybe next time will be better. And depending on the commitment and how far away the show is and how much you're paying to get into it, and all of your other expenses, maybe it is worth trying it a second time to see if you have different results. But boy, after the first and second time, if I just feel like I'm not selling a lot and I'm not seeing a lot of other sales occur for other artists, at that point, I'm really going to question the effectiveness of the event. Then it might not be drawing the right people. Maybe the organizers aren't promoting it in a way that's drawing buyers. And at that point, certainly after a second event, if I'm not seeing sales, my temptation would be to say, let's find another event that you could participate in, and for the same investment, maybe hit it off right away. And I talk to a lot of artists who participate in these kind of shows, and they will tell me, they've learned. There are certain events that I can participate in where my work draws attention and I have the right buyers there and I sell. And even though sales, just by the dynamics and serendipity of a particular event, some shows I'll sell more and some shows I'll sell less. But if I look at the average over the course of several years, it's clear that it's worthwhile for me to participate in that event, and I'll keep doing it. And then conversely, they'll say, I tried a couple of shows and I just didn't get the results. I can't afford to invest my time and booth fees and other expenses in those events, and I'm going to move on and try and find other ones that are more effective. Catherine from Maryland asks about framing. And again, this is coming to the question of consistency. I've had conflicting advice on framing, whether to frame to the piece or maintain a consistent style. Since framing is probably the highest part of my material costs, as it is for many artists, I have resorted to a mix of strategies. I buy plein air frames and put them on myself for standard size panels and canvases. I repurpose frames from thrift stores, sometimes painting them to go with the piece. I buy plain wood frames and refinish them. For my favorite pieces or non-standard sizes, I get custom frames, which even with my artist discount are expensive, so need to be considered in my pricing. Lately, a new gallery asked to see ready to hang work and took 5 pieces, but advised me to be more consistent so my work looks cohesive. I think the gallery intends to have sections for each artist. As a gallery owner, what is your take on framing? So again, longtime members of the critique group and the Art Business Academy are not going to be surprised to hear me say that I agree with what the gallery owner told you, that there can be real wisdom in seeking out consistency of presentation. I might take it even a little bit further and say, you mentioned, I could frame to be consistent, or I could frame to the piece. And if the implication there is if I'm framing to the piece, that's going to introduce some variety to my presentation, right? I might suggest that if we are working to create a consistent body of work, that framing to the piece and framing to have consistency would be the same thing, that we're going to have a consistent enough body of work that it's going to call for similar frames. I would think of it this way, and let me pull us back over here. I'm going to show a couple of images. But let's think about the impact that our work is going to have as a client is encountering that work in the gallery. When I show an image like this of an artist's work, you can see some variety in terms of subject matter and technique, but you would have no question looking at a wall like this, or alternately a wall like this, that this work was all done by one artist. There's consistency in the work itself, and the framing helps tie that together even more strongly. And any inconsistencies in the work are ironed out a bit by having this very consistent approach to framing. And so there's an impact that occurs when a collector walks into a gallery and can see the work grouped this way. I would agree with the owner of the gallery and your impression that they're probably looking to create groupings of work. We find that to be very effective. I'm reluctant to hang a solo piece. I have to do it sometimes just because of space limitations and the layout of the gallery. But generally speaking, my preference is to have groupings of work. They make an impression, they draw people in, they help send a message to a collector that this is a body of consistent, high quality work. It just has a strong impression. Now I have to throw one more image in here. And this is work that is unframed, happens to be my father's work. But again, you can see that his presentation is very consistent. And so there is an impact that comes from having a body of cohesive work and from having a similar approach to framing. There are some other benefits. Certainly, as you have a more cohesive, consistent body of work and a cohesive approach to presentation, It's going to take a lot of the, well, let's put it this way. It's going to make the decision-making process simpler. Now you're not having to spend a bunch of time thinking about or energy seeking out framing. And so that can make you more efficient and allow you to produce more work, all benefits. Okay, so having said all that and shown some images and hopefully given us something to think about when it comes to consistency, let me also say though that I do have several artists who are taking a somewhat similar approach to what you're talking about. And that is that they have a variety of different approaches to presentation, and maybe they are repurposing frames and having them become a part of the artwork. In some ways, they become a sculptural element in the artwork. And so it can be done and it can work, but they're still striving for some element of consistency across that work. I don't know that I have any artists who are doing both found and repurposed frames and expensive, frames, matted, glassed frames. That to me, without seeing your work, sounds like you might have a little bit too broad a range of work. And so we would just want to be very careful about that and have some conversations with this gallery as they're showing your work. Ask them to point to some of the pieces that they currently have. I think you said they have 5 pieces. Which of these 5 has the most appealing presentation to you? If I were to pursue a more consistent approach to framing or presentation, what direction would you like to see me go in? And take some feedback and kind of start to build from there. But there are artists who are less consistent, who that is part of their creative process. They like finding things, and it's part of what makes their work unique. And so, if there is a rule about consistency, as I'm trying to suggest, there is a fairly strong, maybe rule is the wrong word, but rules are made to be broken, and if an artist has other ways that they can tie their work together, it can be done. We just want to be aware of it, and if we're going to do it, if we're going to break that rule, we want to be conscious of how we're doing it and purposeful in those efforts. I think I have time. I'm not even getting to half of the questions that were submitted. I've got time maybe for one more question here, so let's pull this one in. This one's from Marcia. Again, a question on consistency, but older works. This is a suggestion of what we might do with older works. The question is, as I'm trying to make a more consistent body of work, is it okay to discount my older paintings to try to sell them? Should I take paintings that are not consistent off my website? Let me take that first part first. If they're very inconsistent, then yes, I would take them off the website, or at the very least, move them into their own section, an archive or something like that, if you still have a need to show them. But kind of pull them away from your main body of work. To that first question, discounting older works, this is tricky. We just want to be careful in everything that we do, that we are not sabotaging our current efforts to build a body of work and to build a following for that work and to generate more consistent sales, that we're not sabotaging that in an effort to sell older work. And, I would say that for 2 reasons. One is that, we wouldn't want someone looking at our new work, but then to be tempted away by the siren song of a cheap painting, so to speak, to get the older work. Second, I would say that, and this kind of goes to the latter part of the email here. What are your thoughts on promotions on art to email subscribers, discounts around the holidays? Bad idea. I would be careful about that. And now I'm not going to say we don't do any discount promotions in the gallery. We do from time to time. We have several lines of artwork that lend themselves, smaller, lower price points, work that is kind of intended to be shown as series. And so it encourages purchases of multiples. And we found that discounts on those kinds of things, or promotional efforts on those kinds of things, can be effective. they can encourage increased activity, sales activity for those particular lines of work. But we don't do a Christmas 20% off everything in the gallery kind of event. And my concern about doing something like that is that our goal is to create collectors. We want buyers to come back to us repeatedly and make multiple purchases. And if I'm training those buyers that they should not buy now, they should wait until a promotion comes along, I'm sabotaging that effort. And so I want to be careful about that. I don't want to mistrain my collectors, if you will. And so if you are going to do that, I would be very careful about it. Certainly with older works, again, it's just a bit of a can of worms. And my suggestion would be, rather than fret about what you're going to do with those older works and spending a lot of time and energy thinking about promotion and then worrying about whether it's going to work or not, whether it's a good idea, again, I would just set them aside for right now and really keep my focus on my current core body of work and put all of my effort into getting that work out there and selling. Once we've got a strong base of sales for that work, then we can start to reconsider and think about our efforts on our older work. But I just wouldn't do it between now and then. The one other thing I have to mention when it comes to sales and discounts is that I have found that in our business, it's just not so much about the price tag in that same way. Collectors either love a piece of artwork and want to have it in their lives, or they don't. Are there times where a buyer really is on a constrained budget? Yes, there are. But in that instance, I would rather set up a payment plan, a layaway, and give them the opportunity rather than potentially devaluing the artwork. Now, I have to say, we do negotiate. I've written blog posts on negotiation. And so that can certainly come into play, but that's going to be on an individual case-by-case basis to resolve either a potential budget concern or to have a collector feel like they're getting a special consideration. But it's not it's not a big sign in front of the door, discounted art for less, sale today only kind of event. It is a one-on-one specialized negotiation. We've done it. We've gone over time. Again, thank you for the terrific questions. Please keep them coming every month. On our third Wednesday, we do an Ask Me Anything session. If I didn't get to your question this time, please send it to us again next month. I'll mention it here. We do the Art Business Academy. We do a Friday Q&A every single week, so I get to a lot more of these kinds of questions. Join us. It's a great way to dive in and really pursue gallery representation and build your business. But thank you for joining us for this session today. It's always a pleasure to have you here and to have your questions. We'll look forward. We'll be back next Wednesday.